All right. Well, good afternoon once again, and welcome to our TrendSoft Business Central year-end close webinar. My name is Bobby Haggard. I'm one of the consultants here at TrendSoft. Few housekeeping notes before we get started. First, we went ahead and put all of the phones and microphones on mute. Be sure we keep down some of that background noise. If you have a question, which we absolutely encourage, please use the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar tool. Our team will be monitoring those during the presentation. And we'll look to have some Q&A time at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, drop that in. We'll be sure to answer that either during the presentation or at the end. Additionally, if you're interested in the video presentation or the video recording, drop your email into the Q&A. We'll know what that means. We'll be sure and get that sent to you once that becomes available. All right, so I do see that there's a good mix of TrendSoft related clients, prospects, and just people who are new to TrendSoft. So I did want to just have a couple of introductory slides as we jump in here. And I'll actually stop my video and just jump into these slides here. So as we get started, just real quick, who are we as TrendSoft? What it is that we do? We've been around for a while. So at TrendSoft, we're business people, and we come from a diverse business background. We work hard to solve unique business needs for all types of organizations. We're dedicated to helping businesses like you guys stream your operations, improve productivity, and drive growth. As I mentioned, we've been around for a while, since 1996, and we've since achieved the highest level of Microsoft certification available, being recognized as a gold certified Microsoft ERP partner. Which really just means our team is well equipped and we understand your unique business challenges. We're able to provide some pretty tailored solutions to meet your needs. We've been recognized by Accounting Today as a top 100 VAR value-added reseller for the past 5 years, so we're really proud of that. And we currently have about 225 active clients in 17, 18, 19 states. And we work closely with our clients to ensure a deep understanding of their requirements and objectives, and we then leverage Business Central to transform their business processes, enhance visibility across departments, and empower your team to make some data-driven decisions. So our comprehensive range of services includes implementing, customizations, training, ongoing support, and we like to take a holistic approach to technology solutions, considering that not only your immediate needs, but also considering long-term goals. And we aim to establish long-term lasting partnerships with you by providing continuous support and guidance as your business evolves. So at TrendSoft, we have a proven track record of successful implementations across various industries. And by choosing to partner with TrendSoft, you can expect expertise, and then that our team is certified professionals on Microsoft Business Platform. You can expect customizations. We understand that every business is unique, and what we can offer tailored solutions that align with the specific requirements of your company. You can also expect seamless integration with TrendSoft and the power of Business Central. We can connect with CRM software, e-com platforms, or other third-party platforms that help drive your business forward. We provide training and support, and then we also look to have a long-term partnership. So we're committed to building long-term relationships with our clients. And as your business grows and evolves, we'll be there to help support you along the way. All right, so enough of me with a quick introduction. Let's jump into the actual presentation. I'll do a quick introduction here of our speakers. So Nicholas Jackson, he is one of our senior consultants here at TrendSoft, very knowledgeable on Microsoft Business Platform, knowledgeable on Business Central, and in other areas related to Power BI reporting, Azure, and some IT related. So from here, I'm going to actually introduce Nicholas and let him take it away.
Thank you, Bobby, for that introduction. As Bobby mentioned, my name is Nicholas Jackson. I'm a senior consultant here at TrendSoft. And today we are going to do a high-level overview of the year-end closing practices for Business Central. Now, there's a lot to cover, and we're not going to go too deep into the weeds, and it is kind of particular depending on how you use Business Central, but there's some high-level things that everybody needs to cover, and we are going to cover those today. So on the agenda, we are going to cover some pre-close best practices. We'll talk about closing out the general ledger entries, briefly touch on payroll year-end, and then lastly talk about AP with 1099s, everyone's favorite. So to get started, we'll talk about some pre-close best practices. So as the year is winding down, you want to check and make sure that you can post as many documents as possible. So we don't want to have a whole lot of documents floating out there. So a couple of different places to check. These are going to be your purchase invoices, your sales invoices, right? Things that are currently out and outstanding and just haven't yet been posted. So it's simply just running through your purchase invoices and, maybe think of this as a good opportunity for some spring cleaning as well. Running through here, taking a look at maybe some old invoices that haven't been updated in a little while. And then same thing on the sales side, taking a look at sales invoices. Now, obviously, there's going to be purchase orders and sales orders that haven't been fulfilled yet. Not much we can do about those, but if there are some invoices out there that just need to be processed, we want to go ahead and make sure that those get processed before we do any closing to make sure that they are accurately reflected for the year that they actually took place. All right. Next up, we will want to take a look at the chart of accounts. So just in case you added some accounts, removed some accounts, did really any kind of adjustments to your accounts this past year, we do want to take a look and just give it a quick once over to make sure things are looking good. So there are two main things that we want to take a look at here. Lots of columns. Main ones that we care about here are the income and balance sheet column and the account type. So first up, income or balance sheet. So this is important so that we can correctly identify which accounts are for the balance sheet. So this is our, you can see here, assets, liabilities, and equity. Then down here, we've got our income, cost of goods sold, and expenses, right, for our income statement. So we want to make sure that these are accurately identified inside of our chart of accounts. This allows Business Central to be a lot more intelligent and really automate a lot of the closing process for us because it knows which accounts are income statement accounts and which ones need to be closed and brought over or rolled up into our earnings account. Then other thing over here, account type. You've probably run into this already if you don't have the right account type, but we want to make sure that the account type is posting anytime we are going to be actually posting to an account. There are some heading accounts here and begin totals and end totals. If you have those in your chart of accounts, you want to make sure. If not, that's fine. You can just have posting accounts all the way down, but want to make sure those are accurate as well. All right. Then before we do any closing adjustment or closing entries, we do want to do our normal month-end process. So let's say there are some regular reports that you run. So let's say you run aged accounts payable, right? So we can say aged accounts payable. We'll run it as of 12/31/23, right? This is probably just part of your normal month-end procedure, but we want to make sure that this gets done before we post our closing periods. All right. Another thing that we can do before we do any of these transactions is we can actually create an entire copy of this database. Database is kind of a legacy term. We don't use the word database much anymore because we don't really see a database behind the scenes with hosted Business Central, but that is something that we can do. So if you look over here and you choose your available companies and you look at the environments here, we've just got one called production and one called sandbox and another one for sandbox for the plus system. So we can take a copy of your production system and create a new environment, an entirely new environment as an exact copy of production and create it as a sandbox environment. So you do only have 3 sandboxes available for free. So if you do have one of those sandbox, or if you do have 3 sandboxes, you need to let us know which one you want us to remove. But we can create a copy of your production once you're ready to test out those transactions. And you can do all of that inside of your test company so that you won't impact any of your GLs. You can see what the end result will be, and then you can repeat those steps over in your production environment. So a very easy, safe way to do it. That's unfortunately something that only we as your Microsoft partners can do. So feel free to shoot us an email, send a ticket to NAB support or Dynamics 365 support, whatever it may be. Feel free to reach out and we can get that taken care of for you. All right, and then from there we can do our test close in the test company. So All right, so let's talk about the actual closing process. So inside of Business Central, we don't really need to close out the subledgers. So when we talk about subledgers, that's going to be anything when we type in the word ledger, and either we can go here, right? Take a look at all of these different ledger entries. There's a lot of them. There's really none of these we need to close out inside of Business Central, which is actually really, really nice and a nice benefit compared to other systems. So vendor ledger entries, customer ledger entries, we don't have to adjust bank ledger entries, we don't have to close out, anything like that. Now, I will say there is one exception to this rule, and that is related to inventory. So if you do inventory, hopefully you're doing this process already, but there is an inventory posting period. Or it's just inventory periods. All right. And so these inventory periods are separate. They do have their own closing process. Mostly this is just for people who have inventory, who want to make sure that you have a final count at a certain time. You want to close out your period to make sure that inventory can't be adjusted before that time when you have a final count. And that's part of your year-end process as well. So don't have the time to go into this, and it doesn't apply to everyone. So if you want more help on this, feel free to reach out. All right, so first thing that we need to do is we actually need to create our new account periods. So if we come in here to administration, take a look. This is an old tenant, so we've got dates going all the way back to 2016. But we'll scroll down. We can see here we've got dates all the way down to 1/1/2024. So first thing that we need to do is we need to create a new accounting period for the next year before we close out our current one. So we can type in each individual date one by one if you really want to, but there's an easier way to do it. And under the process tab here, there's an action called create year. So all it does is ask us the starting date, 1/1/24, the number of periods inside of our accounting periods, it's 12, and the period length in this case is 1 month. All right, we'll hit OK. And we can see it created 12 periods starting at 1/1/24. And we will check this box here for a new fiscal year. So that's really all it is. And it's the same thing as just typing it in. It's just nice that we don't have to do the actual typing. All right. Next up, we want to, before we touch any GL transactions here, if you do have sub-entities or you have other outside parties that are either sending you transactions or you need to roll up into a main entity, maybe you even have something like intercompany set up in Business Central, or you're using multi-entity management from Binary Stream. We want to make sure that all of the sub-entities have closed their books and have sent the transactions accordingly to the main entity before we close out the periods. So that's something that most of you guys probably, it doesn't apply to, but in case it does, just want to make sure, again, trying to get all the transactions in before we close out the periods. All right. So first thing we want to do is double check the backup. If you do want to create a backup or that extra sandbox company, then double check that. Everything is good there. One thing that we can do as a nice, maybe bumpers on a bowling lane analogy, to make sure that we don't post anything outside of the dates that were expected, there are some global date settings inside of the general ledger setup that we can use to determine what the valid posting dates are for really the entire tenant. So here you can see allow posting from and allow posting to are the first two settings here. So really this is kind of a global setting that allows or prevents from posting outside a certain range. So if it's towards the end of the year and you want to allow for the next year, maybe you could do 12/1-30 or 23 to maybe 12/31 of 2024, right? Close out the last year and then let posting for the following year. This is a kind of a global filter, but some people also may want to have restrictions on specific users. So let's say there's an accountant or a controller that is going to be doing a lot of posting in previous periods, but you have somebody who is doing AP or something that only stays in the current period, then you may have set up some additional guidelines on the user's setup page. So each one of your users, if they are listed here and they do have an allowed posting from and allowed posting to, this will also need to be updated for your new period. So again, if you're already using this, odds are you're familiar with this restriction here, but this can be good because it allows you to set more restrictions on specific accounts instead of just the entire organization as a whole. All right. So in order to actually execute the year-end close, a couple of steps here. First thing that we want to do is actually close the accounting year. So this is not something that we can undo. So again, this is where it's nice that we want to do this in a sandbox environment, right? So we simply just choose close year, and it sees what the most recent year is, and it says, okay, the most recent year is from 1/1/23 to 12/31/23. Once it's closed, it can't be opened, and the periods can't be changed. Do you want to close this year? And we'll say yes. Now, one thing, if these dates are incorrect, take a look at this column right here, the new fiscal year. So it will prompt you to close out the years between this starting date and the next fiscal year. So probably the new fiscal year didn't get checked for this new fiscal year, and it's going to try and close out a whole lot more periods. So we'll go ahead and close out this fiscal year, and we'll say yes. And there we go. We can see now it is closed, and we can see that it is now date locked as well for this accounting period. All right. That is a prerequisite for the closing of the actual income statement. So to close the income statement, there is a processing report we can run called close income statement. Easy enough. So what we have here is a couple of settings and parameters to determine how we are actually going to close out the fiscal year. So first one, obviously fiscal year ending date. So what is the ending date for this period that we want to close out? And that's going to be 12/31/23 or whatever the end year is. Next up, the general journal template. So what kind of what kind of journal entry do you want to make? I would recommend a general journal. Next up, general journal batch. You can choose whatever batch you have out there. The settings don't matter an awful lot. I would recommend creating a new one for year end just to make sure that nobody else accidentally is keying here, or you add a bunch of entries to another batch that somebody else is using. So you can simply just create a new one, call it year end, and you're good to go there. All right, you can choose a document number. So if you want to create a document number for year end closings, you can do that. Next up, it's going to ask the retained earnings account. So as we click drop down here, you can see it is pulling a subset of accounts on our balance sheet to determine which account you want to select from, right? You can't select from the full list or remove filters if your account isn't showing up here, but we've got retained earnings account of 3,200 here. Next up, there's a setting. It depends on what level of detail and what level of granularity you want to post to your retained earnings. So some people just want a high level balance. It says, all right, what's the balance at the end of the year? That's it. Great. Transfer it over for each account. It means your retained earnings account has very few transactions in it. However, some people do want a few more details associated with it, and you can choose details. The numbers are going to match the same. It's just a question of how many GL entries do you want. Now, it's not deleting the original entries in the other accounts, so you can go back and you can still have your full history. It's just what do you want on that retained earnings account specifically. All right, and then a simple posting description if you just want to close for what the transaction is going to be. Next up, close by business unit code. So again, dimensions here, you can close by dimension. So if you have something like multi-entity management, that's going to be impacted here. Or if you have very distinct divisions that need to be closed, or very specific, maybe you do have multiple entities and you're using that global dimension 1 as a filter, you can choose to close by a specific subset. But in this case, we're just going to close everything across the board. All right. We will hit OK, and this will not post it This is just going to create the journal entry for us. So this is also giving us a heads up, and it says, hey, following GL accounts have mandatory dimension codes that have not been selected. So 6100 has a requirement for customer group dimension, right? So when we post this closing transaction, we will have to go manually enter it. It's just letting you know, hey, that's out there. Do you want to continue? And we'll say yes. And it is creating the journal lines. Great. So then we will go to the general journal. We'll choose the batch that we posted all of our transactions to, in this case, simply just year end. And because this is a sandbox environment and we don't have many transactions, you can see there's 3 accounts that we're closing over to retained earnings. Normally you would see each one of your revenue and expense accounts and cost of goods sold here. But in this case, we've got a really simple closing listed here. So this is a good point where you can do a preview of the posting, or you could do, so this is actually going to tell us, again, here's what the 4 GL entries are. If you want to take this and send it to your CPA or have your CPA review, that's a great time to do it. And once we are ready to actually post this, we can go to post and print and actually post it. You can notice here the posting date as well, the C before the last date of the closing period. That means that these are closing entries. So if you ever see that, that'll actually show up on the GL entries as well. You'll just see that C at the beginning there. All right, so simply post this and we are good to go with closing the GL entries. All right, so next up, payroll. So because Business Central does not have a native payroll or a native payroll module, we won't go into too much detail. Just keep in mind, if there are payroll transactions, accruals, your normal month-end process, any special bonuses or anything like that at the end of the year, definitely want to make sure that those get processed, that you get the entries out of your payroll system that need to be made, and that those entries get posted into Business Central before we close that income statement and before we close the accounting periods as well. So just try and get as many transactions in as possible before your closing, especially for payroll, and you can post it. If you do have Dynamics Payroll or some of the other payroll third-party integrations, feel free to reach out to us. We do have a little experience with those, so we can answer any questions or at least get you the support that you guys need. All right. Lastly, good old 1099s. So a couple of things that we want to talk about even before 1099s. Hopefully this has been set up already, and that this setup is already in place before all these transactions were keyed for the last year. But in case it's not, this is good education moving forward. So let's take a look at a vendor card. And there are 2 really important, well, at least one really important field on the vendor card for 1099s. So if you scroll down here to the bottom, if it's not showing up, you may need to choose show more. It's this field right here, the IRS 1099 code. So what this does is this determines what type of vendor it is. Additionally, this will flag to the system, hey, payments and invoices for this vendor need to be tracked for 1099, and I need them to show up at the end of the year. Additionally, your federal ID number, so your EIN, whatever it may be, or Social Security, if it's an individual instead of a legal entity, then you can include, then that needs to be included so that that will show up on your 1099 report as well. So if you go in here and recognize, oh no, I don't have a 1099 code for my vendor, that's fine. We can manually edit it, but it's nice to go ahead and catch this ahead of time. Other thing that we get asked a lot is, what if you have a single vendor that has multiple 1099s or multiple codes for that individual vendor? At that point, we do recommend setting up multiple vendors for that. It just keeps it's a lot cleaner and it's a lot easier to reconcile at the end of the year instead of coming in here or trying to set it on a transaction by transaction basis. Yes, it's duplicating a vendor, but at the same time, it will actually save you a lot of work in the long run because it won't be, you'll always make sure that you have the right vendor code selected or the right 1099 code selected. All right. So next up, actually, let's take a look at this vendor. To actually print the 1099s, a couple of easy things that we can do here. A lot of it is under related. So let's go to actually take a look at the vendor ledger entries first. So there's not much for this vendor for this year. You can see here just a couple of payments and a couple of invoices. If we scroll to the right over here on our vendor ledger entries, you can see the amount is 175 and 150. The important fields that we are looking at here are these two right here, your IRS 1099 code and your IRS 1099 amount. So when you create an invoice for a vendor that has that 1099 code on it, it will automatically appear on the purchase invoice. You can change it on the invoice level, just like a lot of other fields that default over, but most of the time it's just going to be set easy right across the board. All right. Other thing that we can do is, so let's say this was actually this entire column was supposed to be miscellaneous 04 instead of 03. Well, one of the few fields that you can actually edit on a vendor ledger entry is the 1099 code. So we can choose edit list here, and that will give us access to change this field here, right? So we can choose our 1099 code. We can adjust it for each one of these. And again, you can see this is why we recommend doing it ahead of time, so that you don't have to do this manually for each vendor. All right. And then you can also adjust the amount here. So again, if it was blank, the 1099 amount is going to be 0. So you have to key in the amount of the original invoice. So the reason why these amounts are 0 is if you look over at the payment type, these are the actual payments, right? These are the actual payments instead of the invoices themselves. All right. So if we want to kind of get a high-level summary of what we can do on the vendor card is we can go to related, vendor, where's the history? There it is. Related history 1099 statistics. So this 1099 statistics, it's not a formal report. It's nothing fancy. It's just a simple table that says, hey, for this vendor, here's the 1099 code, the description of the code, and how much there was for that amount, right? So you can see here, it does support multiple 1099s. That's where they either change mid-year or you change something on an individual invoice or something like that, the multiple codes will show up here. But in this case, we just got one 1099 code and the amount of 350. All right. So in order to actually print the 1099s, a couple of ways to do this. If there's a specific one that you want to print, simply from the vendor card, you can go to vendor, reports, whatever it is, 1099 miscellaneous in this case, and you can hit print, and it will print out the document. Again, this is where you have this standard amount or the standard format, and it prints in all the values for you, right? IRS didn't change the format this year, which is very thankful for them. So this is the information that gets filled in, right? And should line up. If it doesn't, let us know and we can help you line it up for it. But if you want to run it in bulk, then you can actually do that from the vendor list. So you can go to reports, general, and come down here to your vendor 1099 miscellaneous or whatever your 1099 report is that you need to run. So from here, you can say calendar years 2023. And if you do have a subset of vendors that you want to run it for, either by a really any amount or any field that you want, a specific number or a specific vendor posting group, whatever it may be, you can set a filter so that it will only run certain ones. So one common question that we get is, why is no amount showing, or why is my 1099 not printing for my vendor? And a couple of things to check there. First, sounds kind of obvious, but make sure that they have actual post or paid invoices for the calendar year. So if they don't have any, even if they have an open invoice, if that invoice is not paid and not shown as fully closed out, then that will not show up on their 1099s. Second thing to check is the EIN is set up for the vendor. So again, that's that tax ID number. Really needs to be set up. Otherwise, the system doesn't know what to do with that here, your federal ID number. And then lastly, make sure that there is an actual 1099 code listed there. So if you go to your vendor ledger entries, you're seeing all of that information and your 1099 still isn't printing for whatever reason, feel free to reach out. That's where we can jump in and help. So, all right. So thanks again. This is a very, very high level overview of things that you can run through for your close-end process or year-end closing process. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We've got some availability where we can answer a few questions here, or you guys know how to get a hold of us if you have any questions. Again, thanks again for your time, and it is back to you, Bobby.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicholas, for that great information about year-end closing within Business Central. I know we've had several questions coming in that we've answered throughout the presentation. If you have any other questions, be sure and drop your email or drop that question into the Q&A. We'll have that answered now. Nicholas is actually on here with me, I believe. Yeah, Nicholas is on here as well. And so if there are any questions, drop that into the Q&A. We will be sure and answer those. I know, Nicholas, one came in asking about, I believe it's 1099s, asking if the totals pull from the invoice lines and not the payment lines. Do you have an answer for that one right now?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll have to double check. I believe it is going to be the invoice line. That is where at least the 1099 amount gets written on the vendor ledger entries. But I'll double check that one for you, Ramon, and follow up with you.
Perfect, thanks. And if there's if there's other questions, be sure and drop those in to the Q&A. Again, if you're interested in the video recording, drop your email in. Be sure and get that sent to you once it becomes available. So I know obviously we covered a lot of ground here with the different year-end closing steps with 1099, some good helpful tips to remember. If something comes up that we maybe didn't address on this webinar or during close, please reach out to us right away so we can be sure to get back to you with any other information or any other inputs that may be out there. So, all right, Nicholas, I'm not seeing any other questions, so great job on the presentation. We really appreciate your assistance there. If anything does come in, guys, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm dropping my email and phone number here. So if you have any questions, I can absolutely get you in touch with Nicholas or anyone else on our support team. So if anything comes up while you do start to close your year in Business Central or in NAV, please just give us a call, give us an email. We'll be sure and get you that support that's needed. All right. Thanks, everyone, for your time. We hope you have a great rest of the day, and we happy closing.